The Michael Berry Show.
But I do think it's important to hear from folks with different perspectives, lots of experience, who are well respected in their field. John Berger is one of those folks. He came highly recommended from a number of folks. He co-founded Contango Capital Management, a venture fund which focused on early stage energy technologies. And everything John Berger has worked on is things that I poo-poo all day long. And I think it's only fair to talk to folks and ask, why are you so high on solar? Why are you so high on renewables? And just have him share his perspective. John Berger's our guest. Welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here.
That was kind of a backhanded introduction. I don't know if you caught all that. I don't want to deny that. And the reason was I didn't want you to get all fired. I told you this the first time I met you. I didn't want you to get all fired up over solar and me sit here going, and people at home go, you hate solar, Michael. Why are you lying? All right. So you were recommended to me as a guy who has forgotten more about energy overall than most people will ever know. I mean, I suppose we could put Mr. Simmons into that category or Rich Kinder. But let's start with something that everyone cares about, and that is the grid. You've been an advisor to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee. You've been around this a long time. You've looked at alternate ways to monetize alternate energy sources. Where are we on the Texas grid right now? Because my fear as a Republican is this is going to bite Republicans on the rear and lead to a switch in power in the state. But where are we in grid bandwidth now, and where do we need to be?
Well, we had a trying summer in 2023, and then last year in 2024 was actually pretty benign, really benign, maybe from a power plant producer's perspective, too benign in terms of the cash flow that would go to these plants. And so, why is it that we've been able to dodge some of these bullets as this demand from, data centers and reshoring and LNG terminals and a bunch of, just economic growth? Why have we been able to dodge some of these bullets? And the answer is surprising, is, solar and batteries. Batteries in particular, I think we're over 12 gigawatt hours now and climbing higher in storage. And that's been key and instrumental between solar and storage to really solve problems, say, for instance, in last summer, and is a great example of that in August. So when you look at these technologies and talk about them, look at them as technologies. I always say a solar panel never voted for either a Democrat or a Republican, and it's just technology, and that's what we need to be looking at, as well as looking at embracing our history with all the fuels that I think are going to be needed for a long time, specifically natural gas. And then looking ahead to new technologies, like you're a fan of, Michael, with nuclear. I'm less enthusiastic, so I'll put that up there, much less enthusiastic about nuclear. I think it's fine to work ahead, but we got to understand that the problems of cost and planning and getting these plants online have not been solved yet, and those are really big problems. So it's something we need to address. Hold with me for just a moment.
John Berger is our guest. You might have known him from Sonova or a number of other energy plays he's been the leader of over the years. Coming up.
Experience the excitement of Ocean.
The Michael Berry Show.
Everything you need and most everything you want.
John Berger is our guest. He is a committed energy buff in the monetization and policy side of how we power things, a subject I find of great interest because we can talk a lot about political issues, but energy is probably the greatest issue we spend the least amount of time on. And we think of it only in terms of what we pay for gas at the pump, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than just what we pay in our electric bill. Now start adding what you pay for gas, your electric bill at your office, your company's electric bill, manufacturing, the cost of airlines, the cost of a ticket to get here and there, the cost of heating and cooling your home. All of these things affect your quality of life in a massive, massive way. So, John, we were talking about the electric grid. You've been very involved with renewables. I am less bullish on renewables, but make the pitch. Give me the 2 to 3 minutes on why you think renewables are important and the sort of standard criticism you get of prioritizing those and how you would defend that.
Certainly. So I think first and foremost, let's set aside the pricing of carbon. That is a pollutant. We can get into that argument about whether it is or isn't, and whether we should or how we should ration carbon or not. And so let's set that aside. Let's just look at these solar. By the way, solar and wind have very little in common. I just want to make that point. One's rotating machinery, one's solid state.
No, they have a lot in common. They both piss me off. You are right. You are right, John. Go ahead.
I'll grant you that. But I just want to make that point because that has a material difference. And let me make this. One you can put on your office building or your home, and one you can't. Okay, and that changes everything. And just like a battery, I'm talking to you on a phone that has a lithium-ion battery. It's the same technology that Tesla puts, Elon puts in the power walls. So this is solid-state technology, and it's again technology that's getting cheaper and better, and we need to embrace it. Just like electric vehicles, I heard you talking about, will it replace the internal combustion engine or not? I don't know, but what I do know is that the Tesla I drive is essentially a big iPhone on wheels, the way to think about it. There's not much to it in terms of cost structure. So we're seeing this cost structure come down. And what we want to do is and I won't take an issue with something you said, Houston being the energy capital of the country. No, I'm going to say it's the energy capital of the world. And to do that, we must embrace everything. We must embrace oil. We must embrace natural gas. We must embrace, advancement in nuclear technology. We can get there, but solar and software and storage, batteries of all types. We need to embrace all of that because we're going to need all of it. It's not just us, but it's the entire world. And so when you look at solar and storage, whether it's in front of the meter, which means by the utilities and the big power lines, or on your house, which we call behind the meter, it is providing local power that a gas plant, a combined cycle gas plant, one at scale, can't do. Now, my personal opinion, a combined cycle gas plant can do a whole lot better job, even at these prices where gas plants have gone to over the last 3 years, than a solar farm, okay? And so I think that the point here is that all of this has a place in the mix. And what I've said over and over for over a decade is, if you had to generalize it and say, what does the future look like? I think the future looks like centralized gas and decentralized solar and batteries, because that makes the grid, whatever the grid is in the local area, in this case, ERCOT in Texas, we're talking about, look more like the internet, where you have, instead of just one way, Soviet style command control, power's going down in place, and you just have loads at the endpoints of the system. Now you got all these small generators and big generators, think data centers and think the iPhone that I'm talking to you on, and it's all going in two directions. It's a network, and that's what's exciting about what we see as the future. And so when you strip away the politics here and just look at this, you say, this makes sense. This makes sense together. It's not one or the other, it's together. And I'll make this point about Texas in particular. Governor Abbott and the governors before him, Governor Perry and Governor Bush, ought to be very proud of, yet again, Texas is showing not just the country, but the world, and having leadership about having capitalism in the power markets. And what I mean by that is, what we don't realize often as folks from Houston and Dallas is that we're unique in the entire country. We're even unique to the folks that live in Austin and San Antonio, in that we have separated the customer facing, so think, Reliant Energy Champions and so forth, from the actual poles and wires, which is CenterPoint, from the actual generation, which is, think NRG, Calpine, and Constellation, and so forth. And that gives us a competitive marketplace that embraces new technologies and lets them say, okay, let consumers choose what they want. If they want panels on their home, they can get panels on their home. If they want to drive an EV, they can drive an EV. If they don't, that's fine too. We are leading the country on that. And I really say that the biggest thing that we have going for, again, Texas is leading this, Governor Abbott should be very proud, is that we're showing the way about how to solve the power problem that we are now talking about with almost on a daily basis and in common conversation. The only way forward is to open it up, give consumers choice, and embrace capitalism.
John, you talked about the Texas approach and things we've done well. I want to get a little more granular on what you said, because the devil's in the details here. You said if folks want to drive an EV. Well, the Biden administration gave a $7,500 tax credit if you bought an EV. That is that's altering the marketplace. Secondly, if you said if you want solar, okay, fine. But there have been some very aggressive tax credits on solar. And in fact, the solar folks who send out these blast spam emails, the number one thing they push is not great energy, stable energy, sustainable energy. It's tax credit, tax credit, tax credit. So to me, when you are leading with tax credit as what you're going with, and it looks like the Trump administration is going to pull away out of the budget, out of this the one big bill, the EV tax credit, but you're not just saying everyone can choose. You are attempting to guide the consumer's choice with a subsidy.
Well, that's a fact. Now, what's also a fact is, again, out of Houston, Dallas, the rest of the country operates their power industry as a Soviet-style system. And so
true.
that is massively subsidized as
Yes.
well. Okay. And so what my view is, drain the swamp. Deregulation's a four-letter word. I understand that, but you can call it consumer choice, updating the regulatory landscape and the rules that govern the U.S. power industry to make it look more like Europe. I mean, for God's sake, I hate to say this, but the French are more capitalistic in their power industry than we are outside Houston, Dallas, and that's got to change. And so when you embrace that and you take out the subsidy that is the Soviet-style system in power, then I think we need to take a harder look at all these credits and so forth and get rid of them. And that seems to me like a fair trade. If we can get everything on a level playing field, then let the market work. Now, the separate question is, I mentioned earlier, how do we price carbon? If we want to ration it, and we want to tax it, how do we do that? I personally don't like the way that this country is alighted on tax credits and subsidies to do that. I like a cap and trade system and so forth, but that's a secondary question.
Hold with me. John Berger is our guest. More coming up.
Raise the flag! Raise the flag! You're ready for a gentleman!
Mr. Michael Berry.
Policy and practice should not be run by the government. It should be within constraints regulated by the government. And there are some places where you need regulation. I mean, everybody understands you want to give some sort of guardrails. The question is, where will those guardrails be? John Berger is our guest. He's been a policy advisor to the FERC, but he's also been on the capitalist side, the private sector side of how you make money. And it's important to understand that it's the guys who are trying to make money who are going to drive policy and who are going to drive energy in practice, as it should be in every industry. John Berger mentioned a moment ago that deregulation is a four-letter word. It's a nasty thing. It's a bad thing. It's a bad reputation. And I will give you why I think that is. Being the headquarter town of Enron and having had a lot of friends that worked at Enron, and many of you probably did as well, and friends that did nothing wrong. They were part of a company that was doing some things wrong and doing some things very right. Some really smart. They really were the smartest guys in the room. I do believe that. They just had some ethical lapses. There was deregulation of the energy market in California. And I think this is more than anything else what makes people hate deregulation. So as this wildfire, burned in California, just as we saw recently in Palisades, there was audio that later was turned over to regulators of energy traders, and they say, "Burn, baby, burn. That's a beautiful thing." Listen to this.
What's happening? There's a fire under the core line. It's been derated from 45 to 2100. Burn, baby, burn. That's a beautiful thing.
So this was reducing output, driving up prices, and Enron was getting rich off of it. So the audio files that were handed over to regulators later said he just F's California. One Enron employee says that. He steals money from California to the tune of about $1 million. That's $1 million a day. Will you rephrase that? Asks a second employee. Okay, he arbitrages the California market to the tune of $1 million or $2 a day. So it's pretty nasty. the Enron worker is heard in the tape saying, if you took down the steamer, how long would it take to get it back up? Oh, it's not something you want to just be turning off and on every hour. Let's put it that way. Well, why don't you just go ahead and shut her down? Well, this was later used as by utility regulators as they were manipulating the market. It looks bad. And one of the employees at Enron is caught on tape saying, they're effing taking all the money back from you guys, all the money you guys stole from those poor grandmothers in California. Response, yeah, Grandma Millie, man. Now she wants her effing money back for all the power you've charged jammed right up her ass for effing $250 a megawatt hour. It's bad. I mean, it's very bad. In fact, the Enron lawyer who made the submission made the statement that this doesn't prove anything other than the fact that, quote, people at Enron sometimes talked like Barnacle Bill the sailor. What a line. John Berger is our guest. How much did that particular incident that was seared into the nation's mind because Enron became the picture of grotesque greed affect our ability to have a deregulated, within reason, energy market?
Well, I think people think about that, and Michael, quite a bit. But I'm going to take a different tact on that completely and say that that's not the reason deregulation failed. There was a big trend in deregulation across the economy: trucking, airlines, gas, natural gas. A lot of different areas started in the late 70s and really took hold in the 80s and finished up in the 90s. And power was a part of that deregulation movement, okay? The problem is, unlike, let's take telecommunications, fantastic analogy and example. You had in the 1990s, I'm going to date myself here, but remember the formation of the internet, and cellular technology was just coming to the fore for average person, and you had fiber optics. So the point is, you had a lot of new technologies, distributed technologies, when you look at the internet and cellular capability, telephony. And you look at power, what did you have? Nothing. There was no technology change. And so when you look at the big failures in the case of the power industry, it wasn't just Enron. We had a lot of other bankruptcies too around town. It was, you look at the telecom side, there were no, there were scandals there. Remember WorldCom?
Sure.
Global Crossing? Again, I'm dating myself. But why didn't that stop telecommunications deregulating? Why didn't it? I mean, those are certainly, in some cases, more manipulated and so forth than Enron, supposedly. So the reason was the technology won, and we didn't have technology changes in power. We just got ahead of ourselves. Policy got ahead of the technology. Well, now we got the opposite situation. We've got solar that's cheap. We've got batteries. We've got software. We've advanced solid state technologies like silicon-based chips and software and batteries, right? We didn't even have lithium ion back then. It was in very small quantities. We had it very expensive. So now we have all this. Now we're behind on the regulatory side. Now we need to open up the market and allow these technologies to do things that maybe the vast majority of us can't think about doing, creating new business models at lower cost for consumers that we couldn't do. This is why capitalism works and government does not. You don't turn an industry over to a government. I don't care what industry it is, and power is not immune. It's not different. It is an industry that ought to be driven, as you said, by for-profit companies with rules, with guardrails. So we got to update the regulations. We got to make sure that people are protected with distributed technologies like solar. You talked about going door to door. We need to update these regulatory structures so that consumers are protected. But we got to do the work, and then we got to get out of the way and let the market do the work. And so when you look at the difference here is telecommunications had the technologies back in the 90s, power didn't, and now power has the technologies, and I think it would be a world of difference. Imagine you have your own power plant in your house, whether it's your car or solar or batteries or a generator on your home, and now you can shut that power off from the grid and just use your own, so you don't get jammed with bills. That is the beauty of the market that we have here in Houston and Dallas, and the rest of the country ought to take note and do like what Texas has done.
I do think there has been a great deal of resentment at the consumer level, that the EV folks, the solar folks, and I know you don't want to be lumped in with them, the wind folks, the alternative energy folks, that when they came in and tried to penetrate the market and first really got a lot of political influence, especially during the Obama administration, there was this idea that you had to trash the carbon-based technologies that had been with us for a long time. And, you sort of say down with coal and up with electric. I don't think you can have one without the other. And I think there were a lot of people who resented that, whether that be the coal industry or coal miners or the consumer who had his car turned off during the Obama administration every time he stops at a red light. I think those sorts of things really pissed people off and affected how people think about these sorts of things. John Berger's our guest coming up. Of all the issues that get the least public attention in the political realm, how much regulation should there be or not? Deregulation, overregulation, or not? Deregulation, overregulation, guiding technology here or there, even allowing innovation or subsidizing innovation. How the consumer choices will be made and the economics of all of that. Subsidies certainly make a difference, whether they be on the front end or the back end. John Berger is our guest. He spent a career in this field, most recently at Sonova. John, I got an email. Let me see if I can find it again. Let me ask you a question while I'm finding this email. Can you skate backwards? Did you ever roller skate as a kid? Found it.
I was never very good at it. I did try.
I couldn't skate backwards. My brother could. Bothers me to this day. All right. Roger writes, this energy fella today was earnest but kind of a zealot. I had wanted to ask him about brownouts that Texas has been flirting with these past few years, specifically due to over-reliance on wind energy. How producing solar panels and batteries and wind turbines hurts the environment during mining, production, disposal. Nuclear, natural gas, we will never run out and they're clean and reliable. Relying on these sources is not Soviet style. It works and no brownouts. Your response, John Berger.
My comment on the Soviet style was the regulatory structure of the power industry and was not specific whatsoever to fuel type or technology generation.
Would you fight this guy?
So, well, I don't know. If he's bigger than me, I may not.
Well,
but,
it's like behind door
look,
two at The Price is Right. You don't know if it's Showcase Showdown. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, no, I prefer to talk things out to really make an understanding rather than fight. Look, I think that there are some good points here that you made right before the commercial break, which was, people are upset about being forced into certain things, such as, maybe certain technologies in transportation and so forth in states like California. And I sympathize with that. I really do. And so, again, my position is that, if there's always pros and cons to everything. I mean, I don't think natural gas and oil is evil. I certainly don't. I think that, there's some problems, but it's also something that when you look at natural gas, it's cleaner than coal. That's a fact, right? In any way you look at it. So that's a positive. And there's going to be some chemicals that you use to make batteries and solar panels and such. And those can be, toxic. And how do you manage those quite effectively? And look at permitting. Running the transmission line or building the solar farm or building a natural gas plant. Those all have the same issues where we've just got, our stuff, just wrapped around ourselves, and we can't get anything done, no matter what it is. And so there's about how do you level the playing field, and then let the market work. That's my point. And if he wants to buy all natural gas power, by God, I think he ought to be able to do that. And I fully support that. I think solar's cheaper. I can point to that, and batteries, and that combination is really reliable. But I also would say that, I use natural gas as a good portion of my energy system, and I'm not bashful about that, and I'm not afraid of that, and I'm not ashamed of it. And so it's all the above, but the market works. For instance, let's look at this reconciliation bill. The tax credits, whether you want them to go to zero or you want to phase out, which is probably more of what the businesses want, like Exxon and so forth, is like we need to have policy stability. That's what businesses want. So That's what we need to look toward. So whatever you do with those tax credits, but make it a level playing field, for God's sakes. And the proposal in the House does not do that. You know what really galls me about that is the credits indirectly and directly are structured to go to the monopolies. Those aren't for-profit companies. Those are, in many cases, literally government. The city governments, the federal government with TVA and so forth. And so the federal, these government entities, these monopolies, get the tax credits that the homeowners pay for, and the homeowners don't get a tax credit? That's not right. That's not American. That's not a level playing field. That's tilting the field more to the Soviet-style participants in that industry. So that's, my arguments about how do you get out of the way and let the consumer make the choices and let the market work.
I think that's the real question, isn't it? The extent to which the consumer is driving. I am a big believer in free market economics, going back to the simplest, but maybe perhaps most profound economist on the subject being Adam Smith. But from Friedman to Sowell on through a continuous line, the idea that the consumer will make the best decision because they will review it long before Yelp, and they will buy what's good and reject what's bad. Which brings me, if you could in a minute or less, because I'm short on time, why are you down on nuclear? John Berger is our guest.
I'm down on nuclear because it's the most subsidized thing that we have in power generation, period. Not even close. And when you look at why is you can say that there is a crazy fear of a nuclear meltdown. And when you look at the science, I'm an engineer, right, from Texas A&M, graduated Texas A&M, grew up there in Bryan.
I notice you don't mention the Harvard point because that would be a black mark against you. Good move.
Yes, I know what to emphasize here, but I will say this: I don't go to Harvard football games; I go to A&M football games. So hopefully, we're going to do well this year. But when you look at nuclear, the problem with nuclear is that while it's an irrational fear, and you look at it from an engineering perspective, was my point. I totally agree with that. The science is pretty clear. The math is pretty clear on that, and I think you've made that point on an earlier show weeks ago. But the problem is that that's not what the market perceives, and you can't get insurance from the private sector. There's no company on this earth, including Apple, that can afford that insurance. And so the government has to do it. And there's no place in this country that the citizens that live in that state want that particular piece of property to not be used by mankind for 10,000 years as a waste disposal site. This is why Yucca Mountain, decades later, still isn't operational for nuclear waste. So there's problems here that we're not solving, that we're not thinking about, and it's very costly. I mean, just look at the latest nuclear power plant that the Southern Company did. And they're always like, yeah, but we just cut some regulations. We'll do a better job next time. And then the next time and the next time. And it's South Texas back in the 80s sparked the big part of power deregulation. And
John, I've got less than a minute, but right? I wanted to get to this because a lot of people ask. I'm going to let you take it to the break, and thank you for being our guest. You've got till the end of the segment. It's about a minute. How do you deal with battery disposal? You talked a lot about batteries. It's a big issue.
Recycle. That material can be recycled, and that's part of it, and that should be part of the regulation with batteries.
John Berger,
it's
thank you,
doable,
sir.
And it's fixable.
Every day to see what's going on in my country.
The Michael Berry Show.
And this is my damn country. I fought for this country. This is mine.